I really appreciate the invitation. It's so nice of you to include the Ohio Turnpike in your annual meeting and the opportunity for me to represent. It's an honor for me to represent the Turnpike. May I please see a show of hands? How many people are in the public sector? All right, how many in the private sector? Good mix. So, the public sector people, we have something in common. All of us are in the business of providing an efficient transportation system in one way or another, either as engineers or planners. But you know what? The private sector people, you're in the same business. Because we get it done with you because of you, and we are your clients. So all of us have this mission together. So our paths intersect. And leading the charge on a statewide system, taking care of, as the stewards of our statewide system, I believe that we are all lucky to have people like Jack Marchbanks and Jerry Norrow, and of course his team leading the charge. I think these are outstanding human beings and outstanding public servants. Jack and I go back a little more than 30 years. For those of you who don't know, I moved to Ohio from New York City back in 1992. And was unemployed for a number of months, looking around for different types of jobs, and finally gave up on employment and decided to become a cab driver. And a true story. And got my license in Columbus, set myself up with a bunch of hotels in downtown Columbus. I figured if I get a beeper, there was a problem in Columbus. There was a cultural problem with the cab drivers. And I spoke English fairly well, and so on and so forth. And I showed up with a resume. And I went to these concierges at these hotels, and I said, you know, if I become a cab driver, can you get me some business? And they were so happy. They said, yeah, that's the problem. We get all these cab drivers, and the biggest concern we get is that there's a language barrier and there's a cultural barrier. They eat food in the cabs when the customers don't like it. I said, I won't do any of that. I'll take care of the customers. At the last moment, I made a phone call. And before I could realize my dream of becoming a cab driver, I found out that Jack decided to hire me as an EIT in ODOT District 6. That's how he and I go back. And we've been friends ever since. He is like an older brother to me. We are personal friends outside the field. So, well, that was it. The reformed cab driver ended up somehow in the transportation business. I spent about 23 and a half years in ODOT District 6. So I got to tell you guys, I feel very lonely up here right now. And that's because my buddy Matt, stand up Matt. So Matt is the Director of Administration at the Turnpike, and he's my number 2 guy there. I only have one guy. Jerry brought his posse with him. He's got a cheering section. But for old time's sakes, can you guys be my cheering section too? Please, thank you. But I also have my consultant buddies out there from my days at AECOM, and maybe you can remember me too, right? So clap very loudly when I'm done, will you please? Appreciate that, thank you. So guys, I'm going to tell you a story. I like telling stories, so I think I need to do something to get this thing going, right? There you go. So I'll tell you a story about the Ohio Turnpike, as it says past, present, and future, and let me put on my reading glasses so I can read. There you go. So I'll tell you about how the Turnpike was formed. Now, you guys know the Turnpike is there, and many of you have worked for the Turnpike. And I can tell you that what makes Jerry such a great deputy director and engineer is the fact that he got all his training at the Ohio Turnpike. Right, Jerry? Good. Okay. So even though you guys know a lot about the Ohio Turnpike, I bet you that I'm going to share some things with you today that you did not know, and that you're actually going to be quite surprised to hear some of these things about the Ohio Turnpike. So first of all, why is there an Ohio Turnpike? Well, Ohio Turnpike is here because of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. That is the world's, or the country's first superhighway. They built it for some reason. I think that what they wanted to do was connect Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and all these communities in between. And the Ohio lawmakers were watching what was going on next door in Pennsylvania. And what they saw was economic development. What does that mean? Jobs, communities, commercial activity. And what does that mean? Money. So it was good for the economy. So they decided, hey, you know what about Ohio? What can we do in Ohio? And they decided that they will work with, at that time, Governor Laushi to pass what was known as the Turnpike Act of 1949. It was the Ohio legislature that deliberately created something known as the Ohio Turnpike. And there you see that dark line up there? That is the Ohio Turnpike, and that is known as project number 1. In the actual Turnpike Act, it is defined as project number 1. Why? Because there were a few other projects as part of the Turnpike Act. And those projects were known as projects number 2, 3, 4, and 5. Huh? They kept it simple back then, the legislators. And if you look at the map, and if you try to figure out what the projects 2, 3, 4, and 5 would have been had that Turnpike Act gone all the way through, they would have been 71, 75, 76, 80, and 90. But they were abandoned. Can anyone tell me why? President Eisenhower had other plans. He decided that it's instead of having these states work on these things independently, it is time for the United States to have the interstate system to bring the country together. And that's how it was. Back then it was the Department of Highways, of course, and that led to the creation of ODOT. And the interesting thing, one of the main differences between, of course, the ODOT and the Ohio Turnpike, and as I go through my presentation, I'll talk about some of these things. Let's follow the money. So the revenue source for ODOT is the gas tax, right? Most of it, 90 to 99%, 98%. So the revenue source for the Ohio Turnpike is our tolls. Same percentage, perhaps 95% or so. So I want you guys to think about this. Just think about this. Some night when you can't go to sleep and you're thinking about transportation and taxes and laws and autonomous vehicles and, what does everybody talk about these days? All the way from the Secretary of Transportation to smart people at conferences, they talk about something known as vehicle miles traveled, right? They say the gas tax is going to be obsolete, and someday there'll be no gas tax, and there'll be this way where autonomous cars and smart cars are going to pay for the privilege of using the road. Well, think about that. If there is no gas tax because the future has some other way of paying, then there's no tolls because the future has some other way of paying. It's a direct connection between the vehicle and the infrastructure. What does a future like that look in terms of government? What is ODOT going to look like? What is the Turnpike going to look like? Will we have two separate agencies that currently are separate because of the funding formulas? Think about that, it's very interesting. Because someday people are going to have to deal with those types of decisions 20 to 30 years from today. So now, let's talk about what we do. We don't receive any federal funding. That's something unique about the Ohio Turnpike. Pennsylvania Turnpike, by contrast, does receive some federal funding. We don't receive anything. We get back nearly all the fuel tax revenue that we collect at our service plazas. We have 14 service plazas at the Ohio Turnpike with full-service gas stations. A lot of gas, a lot of diesel is sold. And of course, as you guys know, just as Jerry explained, there's a gas tax associated with it. We keep 5 cents. We keep 5 cents. You know why we keep 5 cents? Because back in the day when the gas tax was first established, the tax was 5 cents. And at that time, there was not a separation between the Turnpike and ODOT and this revenue source. So the Turnpike used to get 5 cents, and we still get that same 5 cents for all the gas that we sell, and all the rest goes into the gas tax coffers, federal or state. That 5 cents that we get comes to about $3.5 million per year of our revenue. Now, we are a government agency that operates at the speed of business, and I say that with pride as well as with humility, and I'll tell you what that means. Government is government. Agencies, boards, and commissions are part of the executive branch in Ohio. The chief executive is the governor. We are under the governor. But what makes the Ohio Turnpike unique is that it is the only commission that actually has a separate section of the Ohio Revised Code. That's it. And that section of the Ohio Revised Code gives us a certain amount of independence, so that there are things that we are able to do. So I don't want you to get the impression that we are a bunch of cowboys who go around doing whatever we want to do. That's not the case. We follow all the rules that other state agencies and entities that a lot of you guys have to follow when it comes to procurement, contracts, so on and so forth. But because of the fact that we are able to act a little bit independently, we can do it a lot faster. For example, did you know that we have no relationship with DAS, the Department of Administrative Services? By law, we have no relationship with them. In fact, when I was appointed to this position, knowing the DAS director, and Matt has a very good relationship with the people at DS as well. We actually tried to work with them to do some things together, but a legislative change would be required for the DAS to oversee what we do at the Ohio Turnpike. So we are independent. We have our own pay scales. Now again, like I said, we are not cowboys. We don't go around doing silly things. We try to keep everything in line with the rest of the state because it's the right thing to do. But you know, on the other hand, because we don't have that oversight, we can do things a little bit faster. There are some drawbacks too. We have a very strong union. It's the Teamsters. Them boys are tough if you haven't dealt with them. When we deal with the Teamsters, it's Matt and a couple of people who work with them. We don't have that entire infrastructure through DAS and various agencies that the rest of the state uses to negotiate its union contracts. It's just 3 or 4 of us. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about our operations. We have about 802 employees that are spread into administrative, maintenance, toll operations, and service plaza operations. Our maintenance is very similar to what ODOT does, nothing different. Toll operations obviously are very unique, so I'll talk a little bit about the toll operations. And then the service plaza operations are very unique. I'll talk about that too. That's our table of organization. I wanted to show that to you. My job is not known for longevity. In fact, I'm coming up on my 4-year anniversary right now. Matt is making me a little bit nervous. Nobody lasts more than 4 years, right? But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So basically, I'm the executive director named by the governor. I report to a commission, and these are the senior staff. These are independent departments. Matt sitting right here. We have next to him the head of toll operations. And you know, the interesting thing is that, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of these people are people that are appointed by me. So majority of the directors who are there are kind of sort of fairly new at their roles in the last 3 years and 9 months that I've been there. You also see this gentleman right here. That's the Ohio State Highway Patrol. Obviously, he doesn't report to me, but he's part of the reporting structure, and let me explain that relationship. Again, if we are a creature of statute, we must do what the statute requires us to do. We can only do what is written in the statute. If it's not in the statute, we can't do it. Within that statute that governs the Ohio Turnpike, it says that the Ohio Turnpike will contract with a law enforcement agency for law enforcement on the Ohio Turnpike, and then it mentions the Highway Patrol. So we actually have a contract with them. We pay them. We pay them for everything that they do on the Turnpike. And the staff lieutenant, a very nice and funny gentleman by the name of Rick Reeder, through that contract is part of my executive team and reports to me. I'm not his boss. His boss is still the superintendent of the Highway Patrol, but he works very closely with all of us. A little bit about our budget. Our budget is about $367. You know, as I said, most of the money comes from our tolls, so it's almost like $1 million a day in tolls if you look at the average. And there are investments, so there's an investment income. We do invest money, so you're going to say, why do we invest money? The Turnpike borrows a lot of money. Every Turnpike, in every state, every Turnpike borrows a lot of money. Then you borrow money, you build roads, and then you pay it off with tolls. That's how it works. So when you borrow that money, you take out a lump sum and you put it in the bank and you get an interest on that. That's our investment income. We also, as I mentioned, we get a little more than $3 million on that 5 cents fuel tax. We have concessions in our service plazas. These are contracts that we have with companies that provide food services as well as fuel, so we get money back from that. What we bring in, we spend. There's really not a separate savings account. So our expenditure is a function of the revenue that we bring in. About a third of our revenue goes straight into paying our debt. We carry about $2 billion in debt. And the reason why we carry about $2 billion in debt is, as I mentioned, there is in every state, Pennsylvania is a very good example, North Carolina is another very good example, there's a very strong relationship with the DOT and the Turnpike. The reason why that relationship exists because the amount of debt that a Department of Transportation, any Department of Transportation can carry is a function of whatever the legislature decides. So there's a cap on whatever debt ODOT can carry. However, a turnpike operates like a business. So it's like your mortgage. You will get a mortgage based on whatever the bank feels you are able to pay back based on your income, based on your history. That's how turnpikes operate. So turnpike can borrow money based on their ability to repay. And one of the things that different states do with their turnpikes is sometimes borrow money against future revenues to build projects that are necessary for the statewide transportation system. And in the Kasich administration, $1.5 billion were borrowed to do some very important projects, one of which I'm going to talk about at the end, that recently won an international award. And that was that debt. The other $500 million is debt that we had from before, from when we widened the Ohio Turnpike from 2 lanes to 3. When the turnpike was originally built, it was 241 miles, 2 lanes in each direction. Several years ago, the middle 160 miles were widened to 3 lanes. So here's our mission and our guiding principles. Our mission is to be the industry leader in providing safe and efficient transportation system services to our customers, communities, and partners. How do we do that? We borrowed a page from ODOT when Jerry explained the mission statement. With the mission statement, it said we will. So we have the same. In order for us to do that, we must maintain or improve, obviously, safety. We are in the business of safety. The quality of work life, very important for our organization. If your employees are not happy, your employees are not going to take care of your customers. That's the first for every organization. I always give the advice, you must first focus on your employees, make sure they're good, they're taken care of, and they feel that they're valued. Customer experience, in our case, because of the direct interaction that we have with our customers at the toll booths as well as the service plazas, that's important. System conditions, obviously, the system. But in our system conditions, we also look at our IT functions and so on, because as I mentioned, we kind of operate separately, independently. That's also part of our system. And then, of course, the financial stewardship. We are a business, we've got a lot of debt, we've got to pay that debt back, and we've got to maintain that financial stewardship as well. So I'll talk about the base pavement program. The base pavement replacement program began in 2011. The original pavement of the Ohio Turnpike was composite, concrete with asphalt, and as you guys, the engineers know, when that deteriorates, it's very expensive to maintain, it's very expensive to rebuild. So 35% of that base pavement has been replaced. And we'll have 3 more additional base pavement projects that will be completed in 2022. And the remaining sections will be replaced for the next 25 years. And that's a bit of a problem, but unfortunately that's the best we can do. The turnpike was built in 3 years, which means all those roads, all those bridges are of the same age, which means they all need to be replaced. But you can't work on a 200-mile construction zone. There'll be a shutdown. So you got to work on this in pieces, and it's a problem because a lot of those roads we'll have to do stopgap measures such as resurfacing, such as partial deck pavement repairs and things like that, because that's all we can do to push that program out. Because what we do is we work on 5-mile sections. Could we work on a 20-mile section, 25-mile section, and try to get it done quickly? It would be great luck. There's just too much traffic on the turnpike to do that. So unfortunately, that's the only feasible way for us to do this work. It's just going to prolong the work that we need to do. We have about 530 bridges on the turnpike, same story as I just mentioned. All those bridges are of the same age. When we replace our bridges, in the 2-lane section, we have made all of those bridges 3-lane, anticipating a future widening. So that's a good thing. But we have a lot of other bridges that are going to need to be replaced in the next few years. In fact, numbers are relative. When you look at ODOT's numbers and you're talking in hundreds of millions and billions, obviously those numbers don't pertain to us. But if you look at our bridge program is in the next 10 to 15 years, the amount of money that we need to invest in our bridges is a little more than twice that we have been doing in the last few years. And even though those numbers in the overall scheme of things don't, we're talking about $20 to $30 to $40 million. not hundreds of millions, but given our revenue and given our budget, that is huge for us, and that is, I'll be honest with you, that's somewhat of a concern. So when we are putting together our long-term 50-year plan, that's what we look at. And because we do have all that debt to repay, the one thing we cannot afford to do is allow the system condition to go bad. Now, that doesn't mean there's any danger. The bridges are fine. We don't have any bridges that we are concerned about from a safety perspective. But the fact is, we are in the customer service business. You gas up your car, you're paying the gas tax. If you choose to take your high Turnpike, well, you're going to pay a toll on top of that. So you have an expectation as a customer. Your expectation is you're not going to hit potholes. Your expectation is when you transition from asphalt to concrete, there won't be a bump on the bridge. We have an obligation to give you what you expect because you're paying that extra premium. So the concern that exists for us is that while we have to be vigilant about our revenue, we cannot allow the system to degrade because of the expectation of the customers. So we had about 49 million vehicles last year, and last year we serviced about 71 lane miles. As I mentioned, it's 241 miles in length, which is about 1,300 miles. So that's actually pretty big, pretty good for us to be able to resurface 71 lane miles. And the pavement rating is 83.81. That's not bad, that's pretty good. I think it needs to be 85, right? I mean, it should be better, right? Former director Jerry Ray used to put things in perspective. He used to say, when you look at customers, think about simplicity. Bridge needs to be smooth, road needs to be smooth, ditch needs to be clean. So from a customer's perspective, that's true. So when you pave, when you resurface, and the more smoother you can provide, the more you're doing for the customers. We are a vital part of the transportation network, and we are a nationally ranked freight corridor. So talking about traffic 2020, traffic was down 21% on the average. But, so, you know, the pandemic, I guess, took full effect in March of 2020. April was the worst month. In April, I think we were down 70%. Everybody was down 70%. So I am from Central Ohio. I live in Powell, which is in Delaware County. And I did not relocate for the job. So I drive a lot. I have 240,000 miles on my car. So I'll be honest with you, I kind of like the pandemic. Normally it takes me 26 minutes to get my house to I-71, and then I'm on I-71 until I get to the High Turnpike. During the pandemic, it took me 17 minutes to get from my house to I-71, and I was there so quickly. But anyway, I'm glad we are past the pandemic. The vehicle miles traveled was pushed down, toll revenue was down quite a bit. We were quite concerned in April of 2020 because of how the revenue went down. And of course, back in April of 2020, people were also concerned about health. Nobody, depending on what channel you watched on TV, you were either going to cough and then you'll recover, or we were all going to die. It all depended on you. So everybody was concerned, everybody was afraid. And we had a conversation at the Turnpike about that. We said, well, what are we going to do? We have this limited source of funding. We are not eligible for federal funding. And we have a limited amount of money in the bank, and the revenue is down 70%. We considered layoffs. Should we do layoffs? We talked about that. We didn't talk about it in public because we didn't want to scare our people. But we said, okay, should we do that? Should we shut stuff down? Should we start thinking in terms of this is going to last 7 or 8, 9 months? And then here's the decision we made. Said, okay, if the revenues are going to be like this forever, we got bigger things to worry about than paying our bills. We're going to lose our homes, we're going to lose our jobs, there's going to be the Great Depression. But hopefully it's not going to be as bad as that. And we had enough money to keep our operations going through the end of the year, even if the revenue had stayed down 70% through the end of the year. So I made the decision that I was going to openly tell every employee, nobody's going to get laid off, everybody's going to get a full paycheck. And it was a hell of a risk. I really didn't have the authority to say that, but I felt it was my, true, but I felt it was my duty to say that because They're worried about their jobs and they're worried about their health. Can't help you with your health. But I can tell you that for the rest of the year we're going to be fine, because if we were not going to find, then all of us are going to be out of jobs anyway. So that was my mindset from an engineering perspective. It made sense. The equations worked out, so I said, let's just do it. But fortunately, that worked out for us, and in the middle of the year, we started seeing our revenues come back. You saw in Jerry's slides the truck traffic, saying the truck traffic saved us. So, when the truck traffic saved us, we decided that we were going to give something back to the truckers. What was going on in the middle of the pandemic? Everything was shut down. Restaurants were shut down. So, service stations, you know, the Loves and all these, everything was shut down. In Pennsylvania Turnpike next to us, they shut down their service plazas and they put porta-johns for the truck drivers. In a pandemic, aren't we afraid of germs anyway? So we decided to use a different approach at the Ohio Turnpike. We decided that we are not going to shut down our janitorial services. That was a big expense for us because we pay for it. So what we did was we renegotiated our contracts, and we told them we'd give them the same amount of money, but since you are no longer cleaning this huge square footage because all the restaurants are shut down, instead of cleaning the truckers' lounges once a day, clean them 6 times a day, 10 times a day, as often as you have to. It's a smaller area. And we'll keep our truckers' lounges open, the showers and the bathrooms, because that's what they need. They need to stay healthy, they need to stay clean, they need to, and we need them for our revenue, and all of us needed them for the toilet paper, right? I mean, so we're talking, yeah, they kept them going. And we reached out to the Ohio Truckers Association, and we told them that. It was really very highly appreciated by the Ohio Truckers Association and with the individual truck drivers. So that was a good move. Obviously, as you can see, the plaza revenue was down and fuel sales decreased. Compounded with that is the fact that when we have our contracts with our concessionaires, these are limited contracts, 5 years, 10 years, and when these contracts expire, new contracts have to be signed, and the new concessionaire may not have the same food concepts. Instead of a Wendy's, they might want to put a KFC. So they got to rebuild everything. So now we got our food operations shut down because of the pandemic. On top of that, some of our contracts are expiring, and guess what? We had a couple of service plazas where we had no food for 2 years. Now that's of course bad for the customers, but it's also bad for us because we're not getting that revenue. Fortunately, everything is back to normal as of earlier this year. So, if we compare it to 2020, so easy, everything is better than 2020, right? So numbers look so much better. The 2021 numbers have improved by more than 20% in terms of vehicle miles traveled, in terms of traffic, and also in terms of our revenue. Staffing levels, as I mentioned, the service plaza revenue was down, and now that we've got, if you look at some of these concepts, you know, Duncan, our service plazas are unique. Sometimes people talk about rest areas, and I tell them, you gotta go there. These aren't really rest areas, these are destinations. During the pandemic, we had people do family reunions at some of our service plazas because that was the only thing that was open and clean. So they would actually call us and say, you know, my mom lives in Pennsylvania and we can't go to her house and we can't do this, and can we meet in such and such place? And we tell them, yes, you can. And one of the reasons why they do that is because, you know, I mean, if you want coffee, if you want a donut, is there anything better than Dunkin'? Things like that. We think about those things. So when we sit down and when we plan these types of concessions, we do look at numbers. So if a concessionaire comes to us and says, we're going to give you 12% off our revenue, well, that's wonderful. But if I've never heard of those restaurants, I'd rather go with the guy who promises 8% with national name brands because they make sense. And also, that's what the customers appreciate. So we have those types of negotiations with various concessionaires. We take great pride in our service plazas. If you haven't been to them, you should take a look at them, and I also encourage you to compare them with the rest of the country. I believe that as of today, I think it's safe to say that we have the nicest, we have the best maintained, the cleanest service plazas in the United States. Unfortunately, that's going to change because New York Thruway is currently investing hundreds of millions of dollars to rebuild all of their service plazas. And you can't compete with something brand new. They've got a concept that looks like a lodge. They got playgrounds for children inside and all that. But Matt, next time we rebuild ours, we got to outdo New York through it. We are Ohioans. What's New York? Yeah. So some of the other things that we are doing at the Ohio Turnpike, in addition to maintaining our system, is our fiber optic network. In the 80s, somebody approached the Ohio Turnpike and asked if they could install fiber optic cable. And fortunately, the people who were running the turnpike had the foresight to agree. We actually have a 241-mile network that goes from end to end. It's one of the largest networks on a public roadway in the Midwest. I know that Pennsylvania and Indiana are in the process of doing that right now. We've had it for, well, decades. As part of that deal that the company made with the Ohio Turnpike back in the 80s, there were 24 strands, and I think we got 12 and they got 12. Back in the day, 12 strands was a lot of fiber optic. But we have recently upgraded that. We have a lot more strands. On top of the strands that we use to connect all of our service plazas and toll plazas to our main frame, we also get revenue. I think it's not that much. It's in the order of several $100,000 a year that we get for them to put their fiber optic cable in our right of way. We also get a lot of revenue from cell towers. We've got cell towers that we own. We also have cell towers that others own on our property. And we actually have a company that manages that for us. It's a national firm. They will go out and seek out more customers to put on those cell towers, and every time somebody puts something on there, we get extra revenue from that. 5G upgrades, we talked about autonomous vehicles, we talked about future connected vehicles and all that. When that happens, whenever that happens, these current networks that we have are not going to be fast enough. So this company that I mentioned, Diamond Communications, that works for us to go and seek out more tenants to put on our cell towers, is also in the process of finding someone who wants to put a 5G network on the turnpike. Solar project development, that is also one of the things we can do, because we own the land around our service plazas, and because we have the ability to do public-private partnerships. One of the things that we're doing, we are currently in the procurement phase, in the evaluation phase. So the model that we use is we have the land, and a developer can come with their money and with their investments to build a solar field, and in return we will buy the power from them. And the model that we use is that whatever we buy from you must be X amount of percentage lower than what we do right now, and then that way we benefit, and they benefit because they make money too. And in a public-private partnership, the private entities have to make money. Charging stations, we talked about charging stations a little while ago. We don't use any NEVI funds. We are not eligible for NEVI funds. The way the laws work, or however the deal was made between the Ohio Turnpike and Federal Highways decades ago, if the Ohio Turnpike takes any amount of federal revenue, any grant, even if it's a small grant, and that portion of the Ohio Turnpike becomes federalized. I personally have no issues with federalized. I work for ODOT, so I worked with Federal Highways for 23 years. The problem is it fundamentally changes the way the Ohio Turnpike does business. Many of you know that if you are working with federal money, you cannot use that money for commercial activity, right, at the rest areas. Well, guess what we have in our service plazas? Commercial activity, we make money. So if we take NEVI funds, and if we use those NEVI funds to put charging stations in our service plazas, those service plazas could become federalized. And if that happens, it will fundamentally change the kind of business we do at the Turnpike. So that is too radical. Therefore, we are not, the Ohio Turnpike doesn't use any funds. In fact, we have been approached by many people who want to come in, and recently we were approached by a company who wanted to build a brand new fiber optic network with NEVI funds, and we had to turn them down. And so our model is simply public-private partnership, our land, your investment, keep the money, pay us a little bit, pay us the fair share. Now, because charging stations are new, because only 7/10, perhaps 8/10 of the cars in Ohio are electric, there's not a lot of money to be made with charging stations right now. As that number gets higher, when Zach, when are you buying your electric car? Soon? Same time when I'm buying it? When hell freezes over? Okay. I'm sorry, I like internal combustion engines. But anyway, we have charging stations on the Ohio Turnpike. But how we do that is, what we did was, in order to make it fair and profitable for our private partners, but also make these amenities available to our customers, we said, okay, pay us, it's a nominal fee of $500 per site, and that per month, $500 per month per site, and that fee allows us to maintain, clean, keep that area nice and clean, and so on and so forth, and then the private entity keeps the rest of the money. It's a 5-year contract. When that contract expires, we will reevaluate. Obviously, at that point, we will expect more. Right now, we didn't think that it was fair for us to ask for more than that, because they are not making that much money. They are making huge amounts of investments in putting up these charging stations because of the power that is required for these charging stations. So we thought that this was a fair way to do it. We've got deals with, we actually recently signed a deal with Tesla. Several Tesla chargers have been installed at several of our service plazas, and more are being installed now. Tesla also has a model where they are developing an adapter for non-Tesla vehicles. My preference is that we're going to go out with an RFP, because we don't like monopolies. We want others, we like competition, and we want to create opportunities for others. So at some time in the near future, possibly in the beginning of next year, we will be putting out an RFP for more charging stations at the rest of our service plazas. So briefly, I'll talk a little bit about the tolling systems. We are going through the biggest thing we've ever done is upgrade our new tolling system. Tolling systems are extremely complicated. If you think about ITS, think about everything that for traffic engineers, think about ITS, put it on steroids, and perhaps you get a tolling system. It is that complicated. I've been there almost 4 years now. I'm finally beginning to figure out what a tolling system is. Because a tolling system is not only technology, policy, law, banking. So the laws that govern banking are the laws that govern how the Ohio Turnpike transacts tolls. So yeah, that's what makes all these added complications. So a tolling system, so I'll give you guys an idea. Just the hardware and software is about $50 million to install. The maintenance of that, it's one contract, it's a contract to install and maintain, is slightly over $100 million for that contract. That does not include all the construction that we need to do on the road to accommodate the new tolling system. Our current system is a gated system. You go in, take a ticket, you get out, pay your toll. It's an old system, but it's a safe system. The new system that we are putting in is called an open road tolling system. It is not the most modern system that other turnpikes are using. Pennsylvania and some of the others are using what is called all electronic tolling. There's no toll booths, no gates, no nothing. You go right through. If you don't have an easy pass, they'll take a picture of your license, they'll send you a bill. Perfect, right? No, not perfect. Any doctors in the room? What happens when a doctor sends you a bill? It goes to your insurance company. Perhaps it gets paid in a month. Perhaps the company makes a mistake. Insurance company sends you a bill. You call the company and say, that's not it. So it takes 2 to 3 months before the doctor actually gets paid. That's exactly what happens with all electronic toll. The management consultants, the Deloittes and the KPMGs of the world will come to us and say, this is how much you can save when you go to all electronic tolling. What they don't tell you is that if you go to all electronic tolling, you're going to chase a huge percentage of your revenue. You're going to have to go find it, you're going to get it, you're going to become a collections agency, you're going to have to hire lawyers to chase that revenue, because unfortunately, a lot of people won't pay their bills. It's a fact. So, how we look at it is something that we call a penetration rate, easy pass. It's a tolling industry term. If you have an easy pass, if 5 people out of 10 have an easy pass, the penetration rate is 50%, right? So our penetration rate is 65%, which means 35% of the people on the Turnpike don't use an easy pass. New Jersey's penetration rate is 90%. So when New Jersey goes to all electronic tolling, they got to hunt down 10% of their people, which is okay because they're going to save a lot of money in operations. If Ohio goes to all electronic tolling, we're going to chase 35% of our revenue. That is a bad business decision any way you look at it. So in order to make a sound business decision and also take care of our customers who wanted non-stop travel, we came up with a hybrid system which is known as open road tolling. It gives you a choice. So if you're going through the state of Ohio, you don't have to stop, but in between, you still have to go through a gated system. The difference is that when you're coming out of the system, we will remove the gates for everyone who has an easy pass so that they don't have to stop, they can just keep going. We thought that was a good system, and one of the things that we accomplished with that is, of course, we don't have to chase revenue, but the other thing we accomplished, it's more of a humanitarian thing. If you go from a gated system to all electronic tolling, you're going to lay off 100% of your toll workers. They did that in Pennsylvania in the middle of the pandemic. They had to lay off 600 people. I don't like laying people off. I think that we have a good compromise here, and in this compromise, we get to save our money. But every year, through attrition, our toll collector numbers are, every year we lose 20 to 30 people that we do not replace. We have about 400 people in our toll department. Over the next few years, that number is going to go down drastically, and I think we have a win-win situation. Just a bit of 1955, how it was. In 1990, we upgraded the system. In 2009, we went to an easy pass, and now we're going to what's known as the open road tolling. I want to show you a picture of what an open road tolling looks like. Here, let me go to the next slide. So if you look at the picture on, well, actually it's not a good picture. If I get to another picture, I'll show you that one. But what this is a new toll plaza that we are constructing. There are going to be 4 of these, and this is going to be, the open road tolling system will be right in the middle where there will be no booths, but then you can go off the side, separated by the barrier off the side, we will still have toll booths. So the road is going to be extremely wide. You'll have 3 lanes in the middle in each direction with nothing, no toll booths for free travel, but then on the side, there will be several lanes with toll plazas. And we put up these big signs. See the green sign? We wanted to do that at either end of the state. It's like an entry into Ohio. These signs light up at night. They're really very nice to look at. It just says Ohio, and it looks pretty nice at night. When you do open road tolling, there's something else you do. You divide the turnpike into segments, a toll road into segments. So there's a fixed toll for crossing from segment A to segment B. These squares and diamonds that you see on this picture represent all the toll plazas that exist between Indiana and Pennsylvania. The ones in green are the ones that stay. The ones in red are the ones that are eliminated. The access is not going to be eliminated. The interchanges are still going to be there, but there will be no tolls over there. The reason for that is that these are very low traveled areas. These are out in the outskirts. There's not that much traffic over there, and it actually costs us more money to maintain them and staff them, and it makes no sense to spend $150,000 to collect $100,000 in tolls. So we have decided that let's just make it easy. There's really not that much movement in between, so there's no fear that people are going to be using the turnpike for free. And also with this system, as I mentioned, we get to maintain, we get to preserve most of our revenue. There you go. That's a good picture. That's what an open road tolling system looks like. If you look at the middle where it says Easy Pass, that's the main line where you can travel without stopping, and then on the side, which is separated by barrier, we still maintain the plazas. I assure you, the roads are not painted purple and green. That is just going to show you. Purple means keep going. Green means that's where cash and credit cards are. We also built a walkway for our toll collectors to be able to go back and forth in between east side and west side for in case they need to do that. So legislation is part of the new toll collection system. We had our legislation passed. With this legislation, we now have the ability to put a hold on people's registrations if they are habitual toll violators. Now, I want to clarify. You get a bill, you didn't pay your bill, that doesn't mean you're going to put a hold on that person's toll. A habitual violator is someone who goes again and again and again, who for several months has just ignored the invoices, and at that point, I think we go 90 days, 3 invoices over 90 days, and even then, if somebody doesn't pay, then that's basically they're telling us they're not going to pay. And at that point, we don't have a choice but to work with the BNB to put a hold on the registrations. Unfortunately, we can't do that with non-Ohio people. We can only do that with Ohio people. In some states, they're trying to do what's known as reciprocity. I will put a hold on your people, you put a hold on my people. Whereas reciprocity agreements exist, they are not enforced. The reason why they're not enforced is because different states have different penalties. And if people in Pennsylvania are putting higher penalties on people in Ohio, well, why should we help them? So reciprocity agreements, so this is unfortunately one of the tough aspects of managing revenue in the toll industry. All right, there you go. So I wanted to mention a little bit about, I'm going to end with talking about this industry. It's a niche industry. I've been in the transportation business for 30 years, mostly public, but also private. I was also in Delaware County. And of course, I've heard about the Ohio Turnpike, and I'll tell you, it's funny, when I went to AECOM, we were actually going to District 12, and from District 12, we were going to go to District 2. And I said, Zach, how do I get there? He says, take the Turnpike. I'm like, what the hell's the Turnpike? And then they took that guy and made him the Turnpike director. Okay, so anyway, and the reason why I'm saying that is because if you go south of US 30, a lot of people just don't know much about the Turnpike, how we operate, how we exist. So it is a niche industry. In many states, they have several toll roads. In Illinois, they have 2. In Texas, they have 4 or 5. In Florida, there are many. But in Ohio, we have only 1. So if you are not in the toll industry, you don't know anything about the Turnpike. So because so many states have only 1, we are all members of what's known as IBTTA, the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association. It's a very close organization, close-knit organization. It is a family atmosphere. I'm actually on the board of directors of IBTTA, and it has members in 23 countries on 6 continents, and the Turnpike is part of it. And we had our maintenance conference in Cleveland in June, and that was the first time that we had our conference in Ohio after meeting for a long time. Now, as part of our annual meetings with IBTTA, we have award ceremonies, and last year we were honored to receive what is known as a Toll Excellence Award. That's a big deal in the toll industry, and I think that was the first time that the Ohio Turnpike won the Toll Excellence Award. And we won that for the organizational metrics that we set up, which are measurable metrics associated with it. And that was a ceremony, award ceremony in Anaheim, California. The other project that I mentioned earlier, that I was going to mention, is the Opportunity Corridor in Cleveland. The Opportunity Corridor was one of the projects that was funded through the Ohio Turnpike with the Jobs and Commerce program put together by Governor Casey. And just 2 weeks ago at the annual meeting in Austin, that project won a national award for the diversity and inclusion component. That, for those of you who know Cleveland, Opportunity Corridor was a really dilapidated section of Cleveland. If you go there now, it's like a brand new city, brand new country. There have been billions of dollars of investments made all as a result of that project, so that's a great example. There's Matt on the left. The person in the middle is my counterpart in Maryland. I also co-chair the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force for IBTTA. with that lady. Her name is Geraldine. And the lady on the left is Julie Meyer. She is the project engineer for ODOT District 12. So she went with Matt to receive the award. The final thought that I will leave with all of you is organizations have a footprint that impacts a lot of people, whether it's a large organization or a small organization. And as public organizations, most of them, we have mostly public sector people here, we have an accountability to the public. What about community? Do we have an obligation to do more than what our mission is and do something good in the community? And I would say that we do. And the pictures that I'm sharing with you right now is every year as part of the festivities with IBTTA, we have an annual conference, we have a technology conference, we also have something known as a maintenance conference. And as you can imagine, the maintenance conference is focused on engineering and maintenance. The hallmark of the maintenance conference is what we call a service project. And we have done all sorts of service projects. We have done Habitat for Humanity, we have gone, several years ago we went to Pennsylvania where we rebuilt a farm that served veterans. In 2019 we rebuilt a Habitat for Humanity facility in Norfolk, Virginia. This year was the largest service project that we've had, and this was in Cleveland. This is the Boys and Girls Club of Northeast Ohio. It's a home for troubled children. If you hear the stories of these children, they will bring tears to your eyes. And this was in really bad shape. So we decided that, as I mentioned, these are, so in that group, people who participated, we had about 80 people who volunteered from all over the country and other countries. I met a man from Italy who had his arm in a sling. And I asked him why he was here, and he said, I'm here to help, because that is what we do in IBTTA as part of a service contract. If you look at the top left picture, you're going to see a man with a green ball cap. I don't know if the picture is clear or not, but he is in a wheelchair. So that man's name is David. He is not in the toll industry, but his wife is a very respected member of the toll industry. So David lost his legs in a motorcycle accident many years ago. David has never missed his service project at the maintenance conference. So what he does, what he was doing here is we built this playground. It's a multi-purpose playground. It's got these panels. He was lifting those panels with one hand and wheeling his wheelchair with his other hand, taking it to people who were putting the panels down. When we were in Norfolk, Virginia at the Habitat for Humanity, he was taking 2x4s, putting them across his lap on his wheelchair and taking them to the carpenters who were building the frames. That is how the atmosphere is in IBTTA at these maintenance conferences. So for those of you who are, this picture in the middle is, there are 18 of us from the Ohio Turnpike. We volunteered. The guy with the towel hat is me. That's my ceremonial towel hat that I wear. I should have brought it today. I've often done speaking engagements with my towel hat. For me, as someone who was a stranger to tolling, this has easily been the most fulfilling chapter of my professional career. And it's been totally wonderful. It's been wonderful because we have maintained the family atmosphere at the Turnpike, and with our participation in IBTTA, we got families in Greece, in France, and my buddy in New Jersey who runs the New Jersey Turnpike has a daughter who is going to Italy, calls up the toll director in Rome. Please take care of my daughter when she's there. She says absolutely she's going to be my guest. We've maintained that atmosphere, and if any of you have the opportunity to participate in IBTTA conference, talk to me. You'll love it. It's been my honor. It's been my pleasure. I appreciate it.